Warning. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat involves the discussion of horror and suspense movies. These movies often include violent, frightening, and disturbing content. Also, we sometimes discuss ladies and their lovely physical attributes, and we sometimes discuss topics considered naughty to talk about in polite company. This program is intended for audiences over the age of 18. Viewer discretion is advised.
Wow, ladies, you have really done a terrific job on this history lesson about the different Halloween movie timelines. I am really impressed. I think people are going to enjoy it a lot. You know, I follow some Halloween movie forums online, and people have questions about this exact sort of thing all the time.
Thank you. I was wondering if maybe we should do a review of one of the Rob Zombie Halloween films. I know it's not related to Halloween Kills, but maybe we could do it in next week's show.
No. Do not mention the Rob Zombie Halloween films out loud. If Steve hears you, he will fly into a fit of rage and start throwing furniture at us.
Why does Steve get so upset over those two films?
Because they're an abomination.
I've watched them both. The second film was horrible, but I thought the first one was okay.
Well, that's the funny thing about the Rob Zombie Halloween films. The first one is a pretty good horror film if you just look at it as a standalone movie. But as a remake of Halloween, it's an abomination.
How can a film be an abomination if it's not a bad film?
Because it was disrespectful to the source material. In the original version of Halloween, Michael Myers is the boogeyman. You never really get a clear picture as to why he's doing what he's doing, and it's just terrifying to think that somebody could just one day turn into a monster for no obvious reason. The idea that a suburban 6-year-old kid could just suddenly butcher his sister and nobody has any inclination as to why he did it just makes you feel that there's nowhere to hide from evil in the world. Rob Zombie turned Michael Myers into just an abused white trash kid with emotional issues and took all the power out of the story. It's like somebody made a remake of Superman, except instead of being the last son of Krypton, Superman is just a kid from Kansas who eats really well and works out a lot and one day decides, hey, I'm a good guy, I'm going to move to the city and fight crime. Now, you might be able to make a good movie about that subject, but it's not a Superman movie. So much of the Superman mythology comes from him being an orphan who isn't actually from Earth, so he can never truly fit in. If you throw that away, it's just not a Superman movie.
Shouldn't an artist always try to do new things?
If the Fender Corporation wants to build a new version of the Stratocaster with 7 strings, humbucking pickups, and a locking nut whammy bar, that's an artist doing something new. If I build a guitar in my garage and slap a Fender logo on the headstock, I'm committing a fraud. It doesn't matter if it's a good guitar or not. I've misrepresented what I'm selling. Rob Zombie's Halloween wasn't a remake. It was a theft. And Steve despises it, so don't you two talk about it in front of him. And make sure Edgar knows too. Now, Fancy already knows, but Edgar and Steve are having a story meeting later today. Make sure Edgar knows.
I think it would be hysterically funny if we didn't tell Edgar.
Oh, you know what? Actually, you're right. That would be funny. You know what? We could watch the feed from the security cameras and have some popcorn. What's the worst thing that could happen, right? Hello and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, the place where we have fun discussing horror movies. I am your host, Steve the Cat. I'm very excited because we have a very special episode tonight. Of all the classic horror movie series, my all-time favorite is Halloween. There is just something about Michael Myers that scares you all the way down to your bones, something primal and completely terrifying. Well, I'm very excited tonight because the latest movie in the Halloween series, called Halloween Kills, opens this Friday, October 15th. We've all been looking forward to this for a long time. So to get you ready for the premiere, we're going to do a special episode tonight featuring films from the Halloween series. My animatronic stunt double Guinevere has spent a lot of time putting together a quick history of the Halloween film universe. So if you're new to the series, we'll get you caught right up. Also, the two films we're discussing tonight lead directly into Halloween Kills. So once you've seen Gwen's history lesson, and once you've seen tonight's two featured film reviews, you'll be completely prepared for this Friday's premiere. I've been looking forward to this episode for months, so I hope you enjoy it. I am very, very excited. Thank you so much for joining us. Now here we go.
Grab your pencils and your notebooks. It's time for Steve's vocabulary lesson.
All right, class, I hope everybody's prepared because it's time for us to get into this week's vocabulary lesson. We've got 3 words this week, so take out your pencils and your notebooks. Let's get into it. Word number 1, stud detecting. This is a noun that refers to the action of attaching a character to a wall or other vertical surface by penetrating the abdomen or thorax with a bladed or pointed weapon, thus leaving the character hanging like a Jackson Pollock painting. Now, in reality, no kitchen knife on God's green earth is long enough to fully go all the way through somebody's chest and at least half an inch of drywall behind and bury itself deep enough into one of the studs in the wall to support the weight of an adult human being. But physics be damned, it makes for a great visual, so we're going to go with it. Word number 2, dechompering. This is a noun that refers to the action of removing a character's chompers by an unlicensed professional, typically without the benefit of anesthesia or permission. Colloquial forms of this term include gummy bearing. And our final word for this lesson, stomp noodling. This is a noun that refers to the action of flattening, bursting, or squishing a character's noggin through the use of a trampling or stamping action. And colloquial forms of this include winemaking and melon stomping. Please keep these terms in mind as they will appear later in the episode. So that's our vocabulary lesson for this week.
And now it's time for Gwen's history lesson.
Hello, and welcome to Gwen's history lesson. I am your host, Guinevere. Today we will discuss the universe of movies that were spawned by John Carpenter's Halloween. Halloween is an independent slasher movie that introduced the character Michael Myers. The film was created by director John Carpenter and producer Deborah Hill, who was his girlfriend at the time. The film starred Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasence. It was the first film for Jamie Lee Curtis. Released in 1978, the film grossed over $70 million, making it one of the most profitable independent films of all time. In 2006, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. The film spawned 10 sequels and remakes. The release of an additional 2 sequels is pending. Although many of the sequels are related to each other, not all of them are related. These films can be thought of as several different timelines in a multiverse. Let's take a look at those different timelines. The original Halloween was released in 1978. It was followed in 1981 by Halloween 2, which picked up on events immediately after their original film. It is at this point that the films can become confusing. When John Carpenter and Deborah Hill first developed the concept for Halloween, their idea was to release different, unrelated films every year on Halloween. Instead of a franchise of movies about the same characters, the plan was to create an anthology of movies that told many different types of horror stories. In John Carpenter's mind, the events of Halloween 2 brought the story of Michael Myers to a conclusion. Thus the 1982 film Halloween 3 was a new story completely unrelated to the previous two films. Unfortunately, the audience did not respond well to this and the film was not successful. Halloween 4 was released in 1988 and returned to the original Michael Myers story, picking up 10 years down the road. This was followed by Halloween 5 in 1989 and Halloween 6 in 1995. These three films sometimes are referred to as the Thorn trilogy, as they explain that Michael's powers can be traced back to an ancient Celtic story about the Curse of Thorn. By the time Halloween 6 was released, actor Donald Pleasance had passed away and the franchise was creatively exhausted, so Halloween 6 brought the original timeline to an end. The Halloween franchise was rebooted in 1998 with the release of Halloween H20. Instead of picking up after the events of Halloween 6, this film created a new timeline in which parts 4, 5, and 6 never existed. Halloween H20 takes place 20 years after the original Halloween and follows events surrounding a now middle-aged Jamie Lee Curtis and her teenage son. The films Halloween, Halloween 2, and Halloween H20 sometimes are referred to as the Sister Trilogy, focusing on the relationship between Michael Myers and his sister Laurie Strode. Halloween H20 was followed in 2002 by the sequel Halloween Resurrection, which picks up several years after the events of Halloween H20. Response to Halloween Resurrection was poor, bringing this new timeline to an end. In 2007, director Rob Zombie released a remake of Halloween, followed in 2009 by a remake of Halloween 2. These movies were not a continuation of the original franchise or the reboot, but instead created a new, standalone timeline. It is best not to discuss the Rob Zombie Halloween films, as the subject will send Steve the Cat into a fit of rage. While the two films do have some supporters, the majority of fans of the Halloween series despise the two Rob Zombie films. In 2018 the series was rebooted once again with the release of Halloween 2018. This movie ignores all of the previous films except the original and creates yet another timeline that picks up 40 years after the original film. Throughout the years the Halloween movies have featured a number of impressive actors and actresses. The first two films in the original timeline helped to establish Jamie Lee Curtis as a Hollywood leading lady. Halloween 4 and 5 introduced Scream Queen Danielle Harris, and Halloween 6 featured a young Paul Rudd. Jamie Lee Curtis returned to the franchise in the H20 timeline. Halloween Resurrection also introduced a young actress named Katie Sackhoff. Jamie Lee Curtis once again returned to their franchise in the 2018 timeline, this time joined by actress Judy Greer. In an interesting coincidence, Judy Greer played the role of Paul Rudd's ex-wife in Marvel's Ant-Man movies. The Halloween 2018 timeline will continue with the release of Halloween Kills on October 15, 2021. The final film in the 2018 timeline, called Halloween Ends, will be released in 2022. This has been Gwen's History Lesson, hosted by Guinevere. Thank you so much for joining me.
And now it's time for our featured film reviews.
Let's get into our first featured film review, possibly one of the most famous horror movies of all time, the 1978 John Carpenter classic, Halloween. There's the poster there, we've all seen it, The Night He Came Home. This, of course, is a slasher horror film, released, of course, in the year 1978. Directed by John Carpenter. And the cast includes Donald Pleasance, Jamie Lee Curtis, her first film by the way, Nancy Loomis, and PJ Soles. Let's set our expectations for this film. What you should expect when you watch the 1978 version of Halloween is arguably the greatest, most iconic slasher horror film of all time. It is not the first slasher film. That honor goes to movies that came before, such as Black Christmas in 1974 or even Psycho in the 60s. The reason you should watch? Well, if you weren't paying attention just a moment ago, this is arguably the greatest, most iconic slasher horror film of all time, and that is why you should watch. No horror fan can go through life without watching this film. In fact, no fan of cinema in general should go through life without watching this film. This film has literally been inducted into the Library of Congress because of its cultural significance. If you like Scream or Friday the 13th, you might also like this film, or basically any slasher film on Earth, because they are all the cultural descendants, more or less, of Halloween. So let's talk about setting your expectations. Here's the scale we like to use. Very campy films on the left that you play drinking games with and have fun watching. Very serious movies on the right. Halloween is pretty far to the right. Now, there is a little bit of disbelievability just because it is a teenage slasher film, so it doesn't make it quite all the way over to Silence of the Lambs territory, but it's close. So let's do a film summary. On Halloween night, 1963, in the town of Haddonfield, Illinois, 6-year-old Michael Myers calmly takes a kitchen knife upstairs, dons a Halloween mask, and brutally stabs his 17-year-old sister to death. After the killing, Michael never speaks again, nor does he give any indication that he is even vaguely aware of the world around him. Now, he's not catatonic. He does sit up, he does eat, he does follow instructions and move around, but he never speaks. He never gives any kind of indication that he understands the world around him. And most importantly, he never explains or gives any indication why he murdered his sister. Michael is committed to a mental institution in Smiths Grove, Illinois, under the care of Dr. Samuel Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance. After having studied Michael for 15 years, Dr. Loomis is convinced that the other doctors are wrong and Michael is not just an unaware, almost catatonic patient. He is of the belief that Michael is simply the incarnation of evil and must never be let out. Dr. Loomis is just creeped out by Michael Myers. On October 30th, 1978, Michael escapes, steals a car, and disappears. Dr. Loomis heads to Haddonfield and tries to convince the local sheriff of the danger Michael poses to the city. In the meantime, Michael is already in Haddonfield and already stalking his next victims. Alright, let's get into the villain profile. The villain, of course, is Michael Myers. Now, we're going to talk just about the 1978 iteration of Michael Myers. We're not going to attempt to discuss all the iterations of Michael Myers at once, but there is the iconic picture from the original film Halloween. He, of course, is of the slasher serial killer class. Special powers? Well, Michael is literally the boogeyman, although it is never explained exactly how he became the boogeyman or precisely what this means. But we do know that he is stealthy, relentless, cunning, immensely strong, seemingly impervious to damage, and completely lacking in anything that could be described as humanity. He does not even seem to enjoy what he's doing. He just seems to kill because it's a compulsion. He kills in the same way a great white shark eats. It's just, he does it just because it's what he does. He does not seem to get any kind of sadistic pleasure out of it. He just does it. His signature weapon, of course, is the large kitchen knife, such as you see in the picture there. And his signature technique is stabbing with a large kitchen knife, often as an ambush strike, but not always. Let's talk about the things Steve liked about this film, and there are many, so this is just a sampling. This is quite possibly the perfect slasher film. Even though it is old, even though it is low budget, it is quite possibly the perfect slasher film. The film relies upon suspense and scares as opposed to blood and shock value. It has you constantly checking the shadows and looking in every corner while you wait for Michael to strike. It has likable lead characters. Dr. Loomis is weirdly sympathetic and likable. Jamie Lee Curtis playing Laurie Strode, definitely a likable character. Donald Pleasance plays Dr. Loomis as a little bit strange and disturbed. But instead of thinking he's a villain or thinking he's a weirdo or a creep, you get the impression that he is a good man and he's just been damaged by being around Michael for so long. He is, when Michael escapes, he is terrified. He is trying to keep it under wraps because he knows the most important thing is to find Michael and get him back into custody, but he is absolutely terrified that Michael is loose. Using the Illinois suburbs as a setting is especially disturbing because it gives an impression that evil can stalk you no matter where you are. Now, traditionally, prior to Halloween, horror movies frequently took place in haunted castles and haunted houses and things like that, and you could always kind of protect yourself mentally by saying, well, I just won't step into that haunted castle, or I won't step into that haunted house. I will not take that free trip to Transylvania and visit that count who wants to have me over for dinner. Halloween does not let you run and hide like that. It basically says, yes, the boogeyman can appear in suburban Illinois in the form of a 6-year-old boy for no apparent reason, and there's nothing you can do about it. Michael's complete lack of any emotion and any apparent motivation, combined with his relentless drive to do what he does, is just terrifying because it conveys a sense that there's literally nothing you can do to protect yourself. Michael, when he comes after you, he does not sprint. He does not run. He just kind of relentlessly, purposefully walks towards you as if it's already a foregone conclusion that he is going to get you. It is just so scary. Somehow, it is even more scary than having something chase you. Things that could have been better. Nothing. This film is without flaw. Okay, so things with which a defective person might take issue. Well, number one, the film is low budget and feels low budget, and I don't mean that as a criticism. Low budget just means that they did not spend hundreds of million dollars making the movie, but it does not look like a $100 million budget movie. If you've got the original version on, for example, DVD like I do, you'll see that it's not even shot in a theatrical aspect ratio. It's shot in the old school, basically 4:3 aspect ratio like you would see on television. The movie was filmed in California and obviously is not Illinois in October, so you got to have that suspension of disbelief a little bit. They did do a few of what looked like fallen leaves just to try to make the point that it's fall, but it is quite obviously California and it is quite obviously not October. The standard for what constitutes rebellious teenage behavior has really changed since 1978. Watching these teenage girls misbehave, and I say that in quotes, is kind of laughable because it's like, oh no, the cops are looking, quick, hide this cigarette. And of course then Rob Zombie went completely off the rails going the other way in his remake and basically had Laurie Strode finger raping a bagel in her movie, so just one of the many reasons to never watch the Rob Zombie Halloween films. But it is a little bit old school. Stud detecting is a great visual, but it defies basic physics. Just don't think about it too much. Just admire the visual image and don't think about the fact that how could a kitchen knife possibly pass all the way through that guy and through the wall behind him and support his weight. The fact that there was absolutely no reason or understandable motivation for Michael's actions is what makes him so terrifying, but some people may not get that. Now, that is not a flaw with the film, that's a flaw with the audience, but it might not appeal to everybody. Some people might watch this movie and say, I don't get it, why was that scary? We don't even know why he did what he did. I was like, well, that's why it's scary, because there was absolutely no reason for it, and yet he did it anyway. Because the film inspired so many others, it may feel derivative to someone raised upon a steady diet of its artistic descendants. Now, little confession here, I was in my 30s before I actually sat down and watched the Humphrey Bogart classic Casablanca for the first time, and by the time I sat down and watched it, I did not even actually need to have seen the movie. I could tell you everything that was going to happen every moment of the film watching it, just because it's become such an iconic inspiration for so many other things. There's been so many spoofs and remakes and everything else that by the time you go back and watch the original, having seen all of the things that came after, you don't even need to see the original. And so if you go back and watch the original Halloween having never seen it, but if you've grown up watching movies like Scream and everything else, it's going to feel derivative because it's the movie that kind of set the stage for all of those movies that you've been watching all your life. Let's go to Steve's scorecard for Halloween 1978. Kills, 6, and that includes a dog. Bare breasts, 6, and that's mostly PJ Souls. Car chases, I've said 2 with an asterisk. You don't really have car chases. You have kind of some single car adventure with Michael trying to steal the car from the nurse at the beginning of the movie, and then later you have Michael in the station wagon following the car with Annie Bracken and Laurie Strode, but no real car chases. Stud detecting. Yep, you've got one of those. Grave sites vandalized. Yep, you've got one of those. Awesome 1970s Econoline vans. Oh god, yes, there is absolutely one of those. And number of times PJ Souls says totally. I broke my counter. She totally says totally 127,000 totally times. It is just nonstop. But with your viewing of Halloween 1978, you also get some bonus features such as point of view sister stabbing. Miss Curtis's outfit comes from the JCPenney Sensible Grandma collection. I mean, I love Jamie Lee Curtis, but her first scene in this film, she's wearing a skirt that looks like it's made from the old drapes that were pulled down from Grandma's house and these old stockings, and it looks like she's wearing corrective orthotic shoes. They kind of went overboard in trying to make the point that Laurie Strode is the good girl and she's a good student. I mean, they really drove that point home visually. And fortunately, she changes clothes later in the film. You get Tommy Doyle bullying. You get a reference to The Thing. Now, in 1982, the director of Halloween, John Carpenter, brought out his remake of The Thing, which, again, one of the most iconic horror films of all time. So 2 of the most iconic films in history were made by John Carpenter in the span of about 4 years. What do you say about a psychiatrist who enjoys scaring little kids? Samuel Loomis does kind of get a little bit of a chuckle and a grin when he scares some little kids in the film. Michael Myers plus glasses plus 1 bedsheet equals Master of Disguise. If you've not seen the film, you'll understand what that means. You get accidental obscene phone calls. You get high-waisted jeans. I mean, at least Jamie Lee Curtis changes out of her grandma's drapes skirt, but she changes into high-waisted jeans. Apparently that's a fashion trend that's coming back. I'm not sure how I feel about that. On the one hand, I have teenage daughters, and I kind of prefer this to the opposite that had been fashionable for so long. On the other hand, high-waisted jeans, ugh. You get implausibly vacant neighborhoods. The neighborhood is just completely deserted when this is happening, and with just a little bit of a tweak to the writing, maybe they could have made given you an explanation as to why so many people aren't home, like everybody's at the country club for the annual party or what have you, but you just kind of have a bunch of houses in the suburbs that all seem to be vacant. And finally, the famous quote from Tommy Doyle, "You can't kill the boogeyman." So let's go to Steve's final score for the 1978 classic film Halloween. Of course, we give it 4 paws out of 4. This is a flawless classic and arguably the greatest slasher film of all time. With arguably, to overuse that word, arguably the greatest impact upon the horror genre since the classic days of Dracula and Frankenstein movies. It still delivers tension and suspense 40 years later. Fantastic movie, a true work of art, no kidding, pulled into the Library of Congress because of its contribution to American culture. Absolutely recommend the 1978 classic Halloween.
And now a word from our wonderful sponsors at PBDCtv, your nightly heartbeat of horror.
This is Mikey from Out of the Ordinary, and you're watching PBDCtv.
First thing in the morning, when I'm listening to music and getting a little bit of time for some creepy research, I'm always representing with my PBDC merch. What a better way to have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't forget to check out our other cool merch at rootsbleedred.com. That's rootsbleedred.com.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDCtv. Now back to the show.
Our second featured film review for tonight is the 2018 version of Halloween. There you see the poster right there, Michael Myers, Jamie Lee Curtis. This is a slasher horror film, and it is a mainstream big budget release, so it definitely feels a little different from the original Halloween, released 40 years earlier. It was released in the year 2018, directed by David Gordon Green, and the cast includes Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, and Will Patton. So let's set our expectations for this film. What you should expect is a mainstream big budget slasher film that picks up 40 years after the original Halloween. You should watch this because, first of all, it is a worthy follow-up to the original. After the disaster of Halloween Resurrection and the Rob Zombie Halloween reboot, this felt like a worthy successor that kind of cleaned a lot of mistakes off of the runway. Also, it sets the stage for two new upcoming theatrical sequels. October 15th will be the opening of Halloween Kills, and then October of next year, 2022, will give us the third movie in the series, Halloween Ends. So this gives you your chance to enjoy a new Halloween film in the theater. So if you watch both of the films from tonight's episode, if you watch the 1978 Halloween and if you watch the 2018 Halloween, you are completely 100% set to go into Halloween Kills at the movie theater, and you know everything you need to know. You do not need to go back and watch any of the other films. As was explained earlier, the continuity for the current series of films goes straight from the original film to Halloween 2018, with all the other films in between not being part of the continuity. If you like Scream or Friday the 13th, you should like this movie, and naturally, if you like Halloween, you should like this movie. So let's set your expectations. As always, here's the scale we like to use, with very campy movies on the left side of the spectrum, very serious movies on the far right. This movie, again, is pretty far to the right. It is hard to get a slasher movie all the way over into Silence of the Lambs territory, but it's close. It is a serious film, and it is an enjoyable film. I like this film a lot. So let's do a film summary. This is a big-budget slasher film that picks up 40 years after the original Halloween, and as was mentioned earlier, in this continuity, none of the sequels ever happened. So don't worry about Halloween 2, where Michael returns to the hospital to get Jamie Lee Curtis. Don't worry about the Danielle Harris series, where Jamie Lloyd is being stalked by Michael Myers. Don't worry about the Halloween H2O and Resurrection timeline. Certainly don't worry about the Rob Zombie remakes. Just watch the original and you're ready for this film. Michael Myers was captured after the 1978 Halloween Babysitter movies in this film and has been in Smith's Grove Mental Hospital ever since. Now, as before, Michael does not speak and shows no interest in the outside world. At the same time, survivor Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, still lives in Haddonfield, but she is now reclusive, paranoid, agoraphobic, and has spent her life preparing for another battle with Michael, which just deep down in her gut she is just sure is going to happen, even though he is locked up. Laurie's paranoia has led to a strained relationship with her adult daughter Karen and her granddaughter Allison, who also live locally. While being transferred to a new facility, Michael escapes and returns to Haddonfield. And while Michael hunts for new victims, Laurie hunts for Michael. Let's talk about the villain profile. We've talked about the 1978 iteration of Michael Myers. Let's talk about the 2018 iteration of Michael Myers. 40 years later, there he is in what is the same mask. If you watch the movie, you'll understand how he comes into possession of the same mask. Michael Myers, of course, is of the slasher serial killer class, and his special powers Okay, so he's been in custody a while, and although he seems to be unaware and unresponsive while in captivity, in reality, Michael is just waiting. He is still the boogeyman. He is stealthy, relentless, cunning, immensely strong, seemingly impervious to damage, and completely lacking in anything that could be described as humanity. His signature weapon, of course, is the large kitchen knife that we all know and love. And his signature technique is typically quick ambush strikes using a large kitchen knife. Not his only technique, but his favorite technique. Let's talk about things Steve liked about this movie. And again, I'm going to tell you right up front, I enjoyed this movie a lot. I had been so put off by the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes that when this film came out, I did not even bother. I didn't read anything about it. I did not rent it. I did not go see it in the theater. I just didn't care. And one day I stumbled across it in a Redbox machine and for $2.99 and said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and give this a shot. And I enjoyed it so much, I bought the movie from the Redbox machine. So I wish I had gone to see this in the theater, and I regret having not done that, and I am looking forward to being able to see Halloween Kills in the theater. Things Steve liked about this film: good production values, well acted, and it looks great on the screen. It has likable, well-developed characters, at least the ones you're supposed to like. It is a slasher film. There are some intentionally unlikable characters. That's par for the course. It does a good job of setting up a multi-generational ensemble story. There's several storylines going on at once, and they all intersect, they all braid together like strands in a rope, and it all works really, really well. It is not afraid to violate traditional movie-making taboos. Michael's first victim in this is a teenage boy, and when I say teenage boy, I don't mean, a 35-year-old actor playing a 17-year-old high school senior. I mean a kid who was quite obviously maybe 13. Even though it has a much higher body count than the original, it still leans heavily upon tension and suspense. It resists the urge to become just a slaughterhouse film. There is a significantly higher body count in this film than in the original film, but it manages to be a tension and suspense movie anyway. It contains Easter eggs and other respectful references to the earlier film and other films in the series, but without becoming so self-referential that it's unbearable. And Laurie Strode is an awesome anti-victim in this movie. Things that could have been better, and again, I liked this movie a lot, so I'm just gonna throw out a few nitpicks here that frankly I did not have that big a problem with at the end of the day. Number one, the film picks up 40 years after the original, but it seems like there's a lot of blanks that the film does not fill in. We don't really know much about Laurie Strode in the 40 years that have elapsed in terms that, okay, we know that she is permanently mentally scarred by what has happened to her, and it has affected her relationships. She's become paranoid and reclusive. She's got a lot of guns. She lives in a house that's basically a fortress. We know she's divorced and has a strained relationship with her daughter. We don't know anything about her husband. We don't know anything about her family. She had parents in the original. What happened to them? We don't know what she did for a living. And understand that we still have Halloween Kills coming. And then we have Halloween Ends coming after that, so maybe they're going to delve into that more in the future sequels, but it does just seem like, wow, it's been a long time, and they've not told us a whole lot about her life. At one point in the film, Michael does something to taunt or terrify a victim, and it feels out of character. It's one of the things that bothers me a little more now than it did the first time I watched the movie. The first time I watched, I said, ooh, that's cool and kind of creepy. And the more I thought about it, I thought, yeah, that's not the sort of thing Michael normally does. Michael does not normally do stuff to try to frighten his victims before he goes after them. So it felt a little out of character. I'm willing to swallow that and accept it because it only happened once. It's not like Rob Zombie where he took Michael Myers and just turned him into an emo kid with issues. This film is big budget, and it is a mainstream release from Blumhouse, so it feels a little bit corporatized and sanitized. For example, there are no bare breasts apart from the flashback sequence of Judith Myers being killed, and those, of course, are from the original. So just little things like that. It just feels like it's been a little too cleaned up to try to make it a little too respectable. It is possible, in theory, to create a film with strong female characters and strong male characters. it is not necessary to make all of the male characters sniveling and useless for fear of detracting from the strong female leads. Unfortunately, this film did not go that route. Most of the male characters in this film are just embarrassing, and I applaud them for trying to have strong female leads. I have daughters. I think that's great. But I think to a movie like Aliens, where you had one of the strongest female characters in cinema history, Ellen Ripley, and her counterpart, Corporal Hicks, played by Michael Biehn, equally tough, hard-nosed Marine, and they were a great pairing. It is not necessary to de-emphasize one to emphasize the other, and this movie did not go that route. The twist involving Dr. Sartain, who is Dr. Loomis's protege, who now studies Michael Myers, is disappointingly predictable. And finally, some will take issue with seeing Michael without his mask. Now, you do see Michael without his mask in the original Halloween. You don't see him a lot, but you do see him. And so people might have an issue with seeing him as much as you do in this film without his mask, but he's in a mental institution. He's not going to be allowed to have the mask. As a writer, it was one of those things where, okay, either we imply everything that happened up until the time he finds his mask and we never actually show him, or we go the route we did. They made a call. I'm okay with it. Going back and rewatching the original Halloween, it's unclear to me. There is a scene early in Halloween where Michael Myers is stalking his prey, and he is outside the school watching Tommy Doyle being bullied by the other kids. And it is before we find out that the hardware store has been robbed and the Halloween masks have been stolen, and it's unclear if at that point in the movie Michael has his Halloween mask or if this is before he has gone to steal the mask. And they just never show him above the neck. So it could be that he's already stolen the Halloween mask and they just don't want to reveal what the mask looks like yet. It could be that at this point in the movie he doesn't yet have the mask at all. I'm not sure which it is, and they just kind of leave you guessing, but getting back to the point, Michael does appear without his mask in the original movie, and so I don't have a big deal with showing him without his mask in this one. And obviously his first mission in getting out of the mental institution was to get his mask back. So it was kind of the first thing on his to-do list, and he does spend the majority of the movie with his mask on, but we all know Michael Myers is a real human being. We see him without his mask in the first movie, so this didn't bother me as much as it bothered some people. Let's go to Steve's scorecard for Halloween 2018. Kills. I counted 18, and that does include the Judith Myers flashback. Bare breasts, 2, and that is Sandy Johnson from the Judith Myers flashback, so there are no 2018 breasts in this film. Car chases, none. Possumings, 2. Now, somebody might argue that in one case, one of those guys was probably already dead, but if you look at the technical definition of possuming, it refers to a creature being converted to a two-dimensional form by being struck by a moving vehicle. It doesn't necessarily say they're alive, so I'm going to call it 2. Stud detectings. Of course there is a stud detecting. It's a Halloween movie. De-chomperings. There is one full set of chompers de-chompered in this movie. Stomp noodling. Yes, there is some winemaking in this film. There is some melon stomping. There is one. And finally, pumpkin bombings. No, Green Goblin from the Spider-Man movies does not make an appearance in this film, and yet there is one pumpkin bombing nonetheless. Let's talk about some of the many bonus features that you will get with your viewing of Halloween 2018. You get a douche nozzle boyfriend and a cringeworthy dad. Yeah, poor Allison kind of drew the short straw a couple of times here. You get journalists don't pay for interviews. Oh, I nearly hurt myself. I laughed so hard when the journalist said that. My teenage son loves dance class. At least I won't have to live with the shame for very long. You get the world's nastiest gas station bathroom. Actually, it's probably not the nastiest in the world, but it's not nice. We'll give Aaron an A for effort at his funeral. Okay, honest question. Do grown women really wear slutty nurse costumes on Halloween, or is that just something men wish they would wear because they are in these movies all the time? And maybe I just go to the wrong Halloween parties because there is a significant lack of correlation between what I see in real life and what I see in the movies. The masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch do make a cameo appearance in this film. Some of the kids that are trick-or-treating are wearing them, and that just warmed my heart. You get incompetent motorcycle handling. You get an attempted kiss fail. Hey, it's happened to us all, and at least he won't have to live with the shame for very long. You get Oscar on a stick right after his attempted kiss fail. You get a tape recording of Dr. Loomis saying, "It needs to die." I love the fact that Dr. Loomis never refers to Michael Myers as he, and always refers to him as it. And finally, I love this line at the end of the film from Judy Greer. "It's not a cage, baby. It's a trap." I just loved the end of this film. I just wanted to stand up and pump my fist. I just really enjoyed this film. So, Steve's final score for Halloween 2018, I'm going to give it 3.5 paws out of 4. After the disappointments of Halloween Resurrection and the Rob Zombie disaster, make that Rob Zombie Disasters, or you could just call the whole series a singular disaster, this is a worthy follow-up to the original that cleanses the palate. It kind of cleanses a lot of debris off the runway. It's exciting, it's fun, and it still uses tension and suspense despite having a high kill count. I recommend this one highly. I recommend before you go see Halloween Kills, sit down and do a double feature of the original Halloween and Halloween 2018 back-to-back. Even if you were a veteran of the series, watching the two back-to-back is a really nice companion piece type experience. I literally did both of those movies today to get ready to record this episode because I wanted to watch everything all at once, and it was just a great way to spend a few hours. So I recommend Halloween 2018 highly. I know there are some purists and traditionalists who weren't crazy about it. That's a matter of taste. I respect their opinion. I'm a huge fan of Halloween, have been since the early 80s when I first saw the films, and I gotta tell you, I really enjoyed Halloween 2018, and I really regret having not seen it in the theater when it came out. But that is a mistake I will be correcting this time around. I will definitely be going to see Halloween Kills in theaters on October 15th. So that is our film review for Halloween 2018. As we approach the end of another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, let's take just a couple of minutes to talk about some other stuff Steve watched this week. Number 1, Halloween Night. This is a 2006 film. At the time I recorded this, it was available free with ads on Tubi. In this film, a disfigured maniac escapes from a mental institution and begins killing off the new occupants of his childhood home, whom, of course, are a bunch of college students who are throwing a Halloween party the night he gets out. Now, this is a wretched slasher flick from the Asylum. Yes, the folks that gave us the Sharknado series. And the business case behind the making of this movie was obviously put the word Halloween in the title and hope people watch it by mistake thinking that it's an actual Halloween movie. Do not engage. No, do not be tempted by the fact that this has Halloween in the title. I know it's that time of year, it's October, it's spooky season, you're going to be looking for Halloween-themed movies to stream. Give this one a pass. Second film, The Evil Within. 2017 film. It's available a variety of places. At the time I'm recording this, it's available free with ads on Tubi. In this movie, a mentally disabled man is haunted by a demonic vision that appears to him in a mirror, played coincidentally by horror legend Michael Berryman. The vision drives the man farther and farther into sadism and violence with a horrifying climax. This is a very weird but visually interesting film. Now, the history behind this film is very strange and kind of tragic, so let me talk about this one for a minute. This film was an independent film that was almost entirely self-financed by a guy with a wealthy family, and I think, as far as I know, it was his only film. And he worked on this film for, I am not kidding, 15 years. The film was finally released in 2017 after 15 years of tinkering. The guy suffered with substance abuse and ultimately passed away before the film was released. Somebody else had to finish the film up for him, so it was obviously a passion piece for him. He was obsessed with it. Unfortunately, he was also intoxicated for much of the making of this, so it's an uneven film, but there are parts of this film that are just visually brilliant. Now, the acting is kind of mediocre, and that's more a function of the dialogue than the actors. I mean, it's got a decent cast. You've got veteran actors like Sean Patrick Flannery and Dina Meyer, who Dina Meyer is kind of an interesting story in herself. I mean, this is somebody who earlier in her career appeared in Dragonheart with Dennis Quaid and Sean Connery, and then had a recurring role on Friends, and was in the big budget movie Starship Troopers, and then I don't know what happened, but she got on somebody's shit list and kind of disappeared, and now she just appears in horror movies, and you probably know her best from the Saw series. So she's in this one. Sean Patrick Flannery is in this one. It's hard to describe. It is a visually very interesting, shocking film. It's like being caught in somebody else's drug trip. This is not a film I would recommend to somebody who is a casual fan of horror. If you are a veteran horror movie fan, and especially if you really like, say, experimental horror or kind of art films, I would recommend giving this one a try, understanding that, maybe the dialogue's not that great, but just visually the stuff you're going to see as this movie goes on is just really, really interesting. Third film, Butterfly Kisses. This is a 2018 found footage mockumentary. This is available many places. At the time I'm recording this, it's available free with ads on Tubi, but you can probably also find this one on Amazon Prime, for example. In this movie, a documentary filmmaker comes across a box of videotapes left behind by an earlier team of documentary filmmakers. As he assembles the footage, he puts together a film documenting the earlier crew's efforts to document Peeping Tom. Now, what is Peeping Tom? Well, Peeping Tom is a legendary blink ghost alleged to haunt a nearby train tunnel. Now, a blink ghost, or sometimes called a Flemmengeist, is kind of on the same variety as a shadow person. It's a black figure, but instead of seeing it out of the corner of your eye, the legend of Peeping Tom is that if you stare down this train tunnel for too long, he appears in your field of vision, and every time you blink, he gets closer. And every time you blink, he gets closer. And finally, he gets close enough that he can reach you, and then you're dead. Now, I have a soft spot for this film because the legend of Peeping Tom is true. Well, not true. It is a real legend. The train tunnel in which the ghost of Peeping Tom is supposed to live is real, and it's kind of in my backyard. The Steve the Cat headquarters is in Northern Virginia. This train tunnel is up in Maryland, not too far from here. So it is a fictional movie about a real legend and a real location. So I like this one a lot, but be aware going in that it is a found footage investigation kind of film, so it's not a thriller, it's not exciting, there's not lots of kills, there's scares here and there. There's more tension, obviously, than anything else. It's not a special effects kind of movie, I should say. But if you're in the mood for kind of a found footage investigative kind of horror movie, as opposed to something where somebody with a chainsaw is chasing people, I recommend this one. I like this one a lot, but it's kind of slower paced. So, in conclusion, whatever you do, avoid the 2006 film Halloween Night. The Evil Within, let the buyer beware. If you're a veteran horror fan, I would recommend it for the visual imagery. If you are a casual horror fan, you might want to sit that one out because it's just weird. Butterfly Kisses, I recommend if you're in the mood for something that's a little more investigative and intellectual, and you don't necessarily need something that has lots of thrills and kills. So that is a summary of the other stuff Steve watched this week. Well, that brings us to the end of our very special Halloween Kills episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. Like I said earlier, I've been looking forward to this episode for months. We had a great time putting it together. We hope you enjoyed watching. Now, if you did enjoy the show, please remember to like, share, subscribe, and follow. You can find us on Facebook at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. And yes, that's Tales with an A-I-L-S. Also, please remember to check out all of my friends and their great programming on PBDCtv. Whether you're interested in horror, true crime, weird history, or unexplained events, we're sure to have something for you on PBDCtv, and we're easy to find. You can find us on the World Wide Web at PBDCtv.com, and we're on YouTube at PsychoBunnyDC. We've also got a large presence on Facebook. You can find the mothership at PBDCtv, or you can go directly to dedicated pages for channels such as Psycho Bunny Death Cult, Psychomantium 13, and Roots Bleed Red. Each channel has a slightly different atmosphere, but they're all a part of the PBDCtv collective. We'll be back with some more Halloween-themed movies next week. In fact, we'll be talking about more films from the Halloween series. We'll discuss Halloween 2, the excellent sequel to Halloween, and we'll also discuss an underappreciated cult classic, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Based upon what I have seen on social media about this movie, there are a lot of stupid takes out there, and so we really need to have a conversation about Halloween 3. In the meantime, thank you once again for joining us. Everyone stay safe and have a great week, and don't forget to see Halloween Kills this week. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.